better, more fulfilling, more honoring life towards God in some of the actions that we do. Today I want to speak about the fear of the Lord and how it relates to wisdom or to our understanding. It's a super common theme in the Bible, and especially in Proverbs. It's mentioned about 14 different times that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge and of wisdom, etc. First of all, what I want to say is there's many types of different fears. Sometimes there's fears of anxiety we have about the world around us, about different times and places and who we're going to marry and what our job's going to be like, and are we going to be able to make it to church because of the marathon today? Or sometimes there's fears of public speaking. Sometimes there's fears of the stocks going up and down and the unknown. And humans in general, we tend to fear, have anxiety about things we can't control. Sometimes it's that Donald Trump says, hide your kids, hide your wife, we're terrifying every single country out here, right? This happens, and we have anxiety about those things. That's not quite the fear, not quite the anxiety we're talking about today. Other fears people have relates more towards terror or extreme fear, wondering what's going to happen. As an example, like the movie industry, right? There's thrillers, there's horror movies, and it's all based off these things that get our minds so riled up and so focused on the terrible evils that can happen. Sometimes people fear wars or rumors of wars or Russia, Ukraine, or what's going to happen in the next little while. Certainly in the Bible times, there was fear like that too. That was a Hebrew word called pakad or pachad. Not sure how to pronounce it. It's Hebrew. Pachad, we'll go with that. What that meant to have terror and fear for their lives. Okay. Like an example would be when the Canaanites, the nations that Israel was going to invade, the Bible said that those nations feared the Lord because feared what God was doing because they could see that Israel was on the warpath and that God was with them. So they knew that they were next. So they definitely had a reason to fear. Or for the Lord of the Rings fans out there, when the armies of Mordor are about to invade Osgiliath and they release the prisoners, Pinky, one of the generals says, fear, the city is rank with it, and that's terror. That is also not the fear we're talking about today. The fear of God is more of a awe-inspiring wonder, amazement. You're stunned to silence, just recognizing the power and the almightiness of Him. And that is what the Bible, and specifically in our text today, Proverbs 1 verse 7 is talking about. It says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, or for some translations it says the beginning of wisdom. And the reason why I want to point out that this is the beginning, and that's our first point, is the fear of the Lord is the beginning, is because the relationship with or without God will completely determine what you know about the world, how you live your life, the actions you perform, and pretty much everything else. That's the starting point, is with or without God, or what you believe about the world. Proverbs says that it is the fear of the Lord which provides that to us. Proverbs 15 verse 33 says, the fear of the Lord is the instruction of wisdom, and before honor is humility. Proverbs 14:26 says, in the fear of the Lord is strong confidence, and his children have placed refuge. Proverbs 22 verse 4 says, the reward for humility and fearing the Lord is riches and honor in life. And a German thinker, a theologian, once said that faith is not only opposed to reason, but it constitutes its possibility, its connection to reality. Now, if you think about the world today, and probably for the past many, many years, hundreds of years, the world and societies out there, view systems outside of the church say something quite opposite. There's two big ones: rationalism, which says that everything needs to be proven, everything has a cause and effect. You use science, you use reason to determine what you know. And it's not exactly new, because back Plato argued that way, René Descartes argued that way, and more recent philosophers as well. And they would say that there's nothing in this world that exists that cannot be proven. But the problem that we would have with that is that can that statement first of all be proven? And then second of all, since the beginning of time, has there been nothing at all ever existing within humanity that we fail to be able to prove? Are we able to explain away every single thing that has always ever existed? There's no miracles, there's no special signs and wonders, there's no God, there's no supreme power, there's no, literally we have to explain everything. And that's what they would believe. And I think that's what a lot of people take nowadays, is you need to be able to have data, you need to be able to have evidence, you need to be able to have a reason for what you believe. But regardless of that, beginning with that belief, that is the foundation for someone's whole belief system. If they say you need to have evidence for it, that's where they're starting their philosophy or worldview. The other one is postmodernism or secularization, which is a little bit more, we'll call modern within the last 30 or 40 years. And it's this belief that says that everyone should be able to have their own rights or ability to determine what's right for them, and what's right for them is right for them, what's right for you is right for you, what's right for me is right for me. And it questions the idea of objective truth, the reality, the idea that there is a God and a single God and a system of beliefs or a system of right and wrong based off of those principles. And what's true for you is true for you, what's true for me is true for me. But as the rap evangelist Lecrae once said, what if my truth says your truth is a lie? What then? Okay, and I think it comes from a place of wanting to tolerate different things, but again, if you have all kinds of people with all kinds of different view systems, and at some point they're going to start to clash heads, and what is the truth at that point in time? I had a friend once back in Canada. We had a few chats pretty much about this thing, and he came to church a few times, but his idea was, well, how am I really supposed to know? How am I really supposed to tell if Christians say this thing and Muslims say this thing, Hindus say this thing, and then there's this new age stuff and there's energy, and how do I really know? So why don't I just hedge my bets and take a little bit from each one, and there's some truth in here, some truth in here, so I'm just kind of gonna go mix them all together. And that was his idea, was that he can't sell himself out to just one, so you take all these different ideas. And it's very common in the world today, but if we replace religion with girl or girlfriend, how would that work out? If a boy's like, hey, I like this about this girl, and this about this girl, and this about this girl, and this about this girl, not gonna be a happy place, right? But we do it with religion, we do it with our way of thinking all the time. And some people say they don't have faith. Some people say they aren't sure what it is. They avoid answering those questions. We busy ourselves with work, with finances, with sports, with having a family, with buying a house, and we just kind of stick our head in the sand and don't dig into these questions of where does truth come from and where does wisdom come from. But at the end of the day, I think a sermon or two, one of the sermons that I gave a few months ago, we talked about this conundrum that Jesus gives, that if he says who he says he claims to be God. So either he is a liar and he's not God, or he is a madman, or he truly is who he says he is. And every human has to make that decision of, is he who he says he is? So if you're standing right here and there's a gap in front of you, and this is, yes, I believe who Jesus says he is, I'm going to trust him on that, or whether it's behind you and say, no, I don't believe who he says he claims to be, there's a gap either way. So every single person has to choose and decide who Jesus is and what he says is or is not true. But again, with Proverbs, it says the beginning of all wisdom and understanding of life comes from the question, what do you believe about God? And this relationship with God needs to be central in our lives. It can't be another improve my life tool or a gym membership where you can get a little healthier, or it's a good idea so I'll add it in, or how do I use God to help me get towards the things I want. And it needs to be the most central, most important part of our lives, because it's the starting point from which everything else in our lives, our mind, our heart, and our actions springs forth. The question should be, how does what I'm doing affect my relationship with God? Or how does the life I'm living currently bring me closer into communion with Him? And this is how we become more competent with knowing the truth and knowing wisdom. So the first thing is that the fear of God is the beginning of knowledge. The second thing is knowing God. Deuteronomy 10 verse 12 says, and now Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you but to fear the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to Him, to love Him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and to observe the Lord's commands and decrees that I'm giving you today for your own good. Now if you notice here in the verse, fear, love, serve, they all go hand in hand. Fear and love are together, not separate. Okay? This fear that we have of God is enhanced by the love of Him. The more we fear Him, the more we love Him. Psalm 130 verse 4 says, with you there is forgiveness. Therefore, I fear you. Now, if the fear of the Lord meant being scared of God, thinking that, and again, I think a lot of us, maybe we grew up in churches or had experiences in our own lives, perhaps, when we imagine God as this policeman in the sky with a big stick and He's going to whack us whenever we do something wrong. Even in my own life, when I was, how old was I, 10, 11 years old maybe, I had this period of time, it was probably a month or 2 months, where I was so consumed with this idea that maybe I had sinned somehow, or I had committed the unforgivable sin, which I'll let Blake talk about in a future sermon at some point in time, or I had done something that God would just be not happy with me. And during that time, I was so, again, just obsessed with like not trying to avoid dying. And so I remember, and this is back in Canada, okay? This is not South Africa where things are a little different here, but in Canada, we don't have fences. Okay, we have the house and you have your yard. You have a fence if you got like a white picket fence, you want to show off and make it look fancy and it's pretty and whatever, but we don't have fences around our houses, okay? Oftentimes, even growing up, we would not even lock our doors. Sometimes on the farms, you would leave your doors wide open and you walk right in, but your biggest concern at that point was if a bear or a raccoon was gonna come into your house and take things and eat stuff, okay? That'd be quite the surprise in the morning, waking up to a bear in your house. But the point is, I was so consumed with this that I would literally go around the house after my parents went to bed and I'd check the doors and I'd make sure they're locked, and I'd go to the garage and make sure that one's locked, and probably 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times I'd go back just to make sure, go back just to make sure, go back, because I was fearful and terrorized that perhaps something could happen to me and I wasn't right with God yet, and I wanted to make sure that I was right with Him, okay? And that's the fear that I had at that point in time. But in that simplistic understanding of God, I was thinking that He was this person who could punish me or I wasn't right with Him, instead of fearing Him in the awe and wonder type sense. If fear of the Lord meant being scared of God, the more forgiveness I get, the less I would fear Him, right? If some people live their Christian lives that way. They say, oh, I've been forgiven, Jesus died on the cross for me, so now I'm going to go and do whatever I want because I have forgiveness. But that's also not an accurate understanding either, right? The Psalm says, with you is there forgiveness. Therefore, so because I'm forgiven, I fear you. They go hand in hand. The more you get God's love lavished out on you, the more you fear Him. It's a life-rearranging awe and wonder for who He is, for what He's done, for how high above His understanding His thoughts are above our thoughts, and how still, even though we mess up and we sin and we make mistakes, how He's still able to care for us and He's still able to love us. He should be someone we can't do without, and that's what we should fear, not being without or being removed from God. He's someone we can't afford to lose or to be away from. Proverbs 9 verse 10 says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. And when God moves from just being a nice concept or an idea, or maybe just reading the Bible and knowing the facts about Him, or knowing the ideas about Him, or knowing some of the rules or commands that He said, or maybe He was just a good teacher, when He moves from being this concept or peripheral thought in our minds to being the core of our identity, the thing you most fear losing, the reason for living the rest of your life, that's when you get to the point of truly knowing God. Now, there's a guy named Jonathan Edwards. You may have heard about him once or twice. He's an evangelist back in, 1700s, something like that, 16, 17, 1800s. And I'm going to paraphrase him here. He said, there's an infinite difference between being told that biltong is the most delicious lekker meat in the world, and actually tasting and feeling the complexity of a beautiful piece of dried protein, fat, and spice. Am I right? Okay? And when you first tell it to people, you're like, yeah, I have this piece of meat and I hang it up and I have this portable fan I got off Takeoff and I blow air on it and there's spices in there and it's super delicious, it's amazing. People at first are like, well, what are you eating? Then even if you convince them that it's great, then perhaps the Americans would say, yeah, we got beef jerky. Blake, you can keep your dry cardboard meat. There's an infinite difference between just hearing about biltong and experiencing it with your senses, feeling and touching and tasting and seeing it, right? And so just like there's an infinite difference between knowing about God's love, knowing His character and hearing about Him, between actually experiencing Him in your life personally, day to day, and having a relationship with Him. Psalm 34 verse 8 says, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the one who takes refuge in Him. And I think that when we use our senses to know and experience God personally, whether that's in the food we eat and wondering how amazing this tastes, or in the things we see, or in the sunsets, or in the mountains, or in the trees, or in the things we hear, or in community with other people, being encouraged by them, I think that's when we can really know and experience God. Obviously, we have the Bible to read, we have prayer to be able to communicate, but using the full, all of our senses to experience Him brings about a lot of joy and a deeper sense of knowing who He is. The third point is trusting God. The fear of the Lord leads to knowing God, which is, the beginning was the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but there's knowing God, and that's in our inner personal life, while trusting God is the overflow or the result of our personal practice of our inner knowing Him, right? Knowing Him is the inside, trusting Him is what flows out of that. And if God is your fear, then there's nothing else we'd be more afraid of losing, nothing else we'd be more afraid of being away from. We can't bear to have the awe and wonder and joy of knowing Him apart from us, especially when we've already experienced it. But the problem is, and we see this all the time, so many people, probably all of us at some point in time or another as well, we say, I'll go to church if, or I'll pray if, or I'll try this Christian thing out if. And you can insert whatever relational or financial or marital or physical crisis, and sometimes they're truly big crises, but oftentimes it's, okay, marriage, I want that new job, can I get a 20 rand raise? Can you change so-and-so's hearts that they realize they love me and fall in love with me and marry me? I want more peace, etc. All these different little wants. And God does tell us to bring our wants and our needs and desires to Him, but oftentimes we just have the intention wrong, or it's a little bit backwards, okay? Because at the bottom of all those ifs, I'll trust God if, I'll go to church if, I'll pray if, is the things we actually fear. Whether that's loneliness, or struggle with relationships, or struggle with finances, those are what the things we truly fear, not God Himself. We say we want God to be our, call Him the genie in the bottle, or our secretary, or our consultant, just to help us get the things we want, or the things we think we need, or to avoid having the pain of not having them. We say, I'll work with you as long as you understand what I want to, and you know what I'm talking about, or I'll call you when I need you, and if it works out, then great. Otherwise, maybe it'll be a little while until I call you again. And that's oftentimes how as Christians, we tend to live our lives. And that's just it's the wrong perspective of what we need to do when we're actually trusting God. Does anybody know what the speed of light is? Yes?
186,282 miles per second.
That's very fast, okay? In kilometers, it's about 300,000 kilometers a second. Okay, I didn't know that. I'm impressed that you know that. That's wonderful. I think we all learned it at some point in time. I had to Google this though, so thank you for your answer. It's about 300,000 kilometers per second. Okay, to get to Canada from here, it's about 15,000 kilometers, and it takes 24 hours minimum. Our car this morning reads out 299,912 kilometers, and it's taken us 15 years to get to that point. Yet speed of light is 300,000 kilometers per second. What is a light year?
How far light travels in 1 year?
There we go. Okay, and how far is that?
6 trillion miles.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, 9.46 trillion kilometers.
Call me the Encyclopedia of Useless Information.
That is a great title. But yes, so it's 9.46 trillion kilometers. And the last one here, the observable universe. What we can humanly see at this point in time. How far is that?
I think it's about 13 billion light years.
Perhaps maybe a little more. He says, I looked this up this week, 93 trillion light years of distance between us, or between what we can see currently. So you have 93 trillion times 9.46 trillion. Quick maths, anybody? I didn't do it, I'm just asking. Point of this is, it's a little rhetorical. How big is God? Okay? He created all these things. He still sustains it. Psalm 33 verse 6 says, by the word of the Lord, the heavens were made. The stars by the breath of His mouth. How many stars are there? Billions, millions, trillions? I don't know. Okay? Psalm 24 verse 1 and 2 states, the earth is the Lord's, and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. For He founded it on the seas and established it on the waters. So we go from Psalm 33 where He talks about He created the heavens and the stars and everything there in the big macrocosm, and yet He still cares for the earth and every single inhabitant in it. You and me, people in India, the ones over in North America, He still is involved with us. Okay? And here's the point. Matthew 10, 29 to 31. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny, and not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father? Your Father. But even the hairs of your head are all numbered. He knows us by name. He knows the hairs on our heads. He knows when sparrows fall to the ground. He's still intelligently and intrinsically involved with what happens here. Even though, to be honest with you, we'll never, well, we know why, but bear with me with this question. Personally, me, I'd rather watch supernovas exploding and stars going crazy. I think that's beautiful. Yet he deals with us here, you and me, who mess up and who sin, who make mistakes, and still dealing with us because he loves us. And that's the frame of reference we need to have when we think about who is God and how do we trust him, the one who created all this stuff and who is still involved with all our little lives. 2 questions we can ask ourselves if we are unconditionally trusting. You look at every area of your life and you ask 2 questions. Number 1, are you willing to do whatever God says about this area, whether you agree with it or not? And number 2, are you willing to accept whatever he has planned in that area, whether you like it or not? And if the answer is no, then we aren't exactly unconditionally trusting. And just to give you a couple of personal examples of my life, when I first graduated chiropractic school in the States, I was supposed to stay on, and I had a job lined up, but I had to wait for visa and licensing and whatever. So essentially for the first 3 or 4 months, I had to wait. And I was just essentially just doing like random stuff. I'd go meet people in the mall and ask them, hey, have you had your spine checked? Has your posture been checked yet? And I go meet them there. And that's what I was doing. I wasn't able to practice my thing. I'd trained for so long for my student loans, which in America, those are heavy. There's a lot of that. They were starting to come due as well, and I was getting stressed. And I remember the one day I went back to, I don't know if it's the Home Affairs or whatever, but Home Affairs here, we got some problems. In America, there's still some problems with Home Affairs there too. I went in there, somebody had done something wrong, so it meant that for a bunch more weeks or months, who knows what the end date was, I was still gonna just be not doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing. I remember getting out of that building, I was crying, I was frustrated, I went to the car, I was banging on the steering wheel, said some things I shouldn't have, I prayed, I said, why God, why is all this happening? Why do I have to wait? It's frustrating. Has anybody ever experienced something like that, where you're just like waiting, you just don't know why? Sometimes God gives you answers, sometimes he makes you wait a little, and you understand it later. In this instance, he gave me an answer right away, which was actually very cool and also put me in my place a little bit. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I went to the first stoplight, okay? This is a city of about 1.2 million people, so it's a big city. It's not a little small town. First stoplight, there's a car who pulls up beside me. It's Steven. Now, I'd met Steven in a mall, and I'd say, hey, how's your spine doing? He's like, oh, I have all kinds of neck pain and shoulder pain. Can you help me? And I said, yeah, go to this office here. And he went, started getting adjusted, okay? Steven was 30-something years old, worked at Walmart, neck pain, back pain, he had cerebral palsy as well. Okay, it's functioning form, but one hand was like this, the other hand was like this. Okay, when we started taking care of him, his neck pain got better. He got off some of his medications. He's like, man, I'm so glad I met you guys. This is amazing. I'm so excited that I've had this opportunity to improve my health and feel better. And here I am coming out of the Home Affairs building and come out, and the first person I see as I look to my left, and his car, which is also falling apart, it's Steven. And again, sometimes God gives us those answers of why really quickly, sometimes not so quick. Another example is being here, again, waiting. I like to say that I had 3 younger sisters, so I'm good with patience, but I've realized that I have to keep on learning it again and again. As you guys know, when we first came here, I had to wait for a year and a half for my license, or for my visa and my licensing. And it was a time where, again, there was a lot of frustration, there was a lot of anger and annoyance. There was me, I didn't handle it how I should have, how I'm talking to you today, how I should have, right? Said things, did things. I realized that, again, I'm still not as patient, not as trusting as I should be. And regardless of that, if I look back now, a year and a half after that, so 3 years we've been here, this church has been started, which is really, really cool. And we've been able to play a little part of that. My friend who I met at the gym got baptized last week. And if we hadn't been here, would that have ever happened? Maybe if it was part of God's will, but he was able to use us, even though through our frustrations and doubts and annoyances and fears, he's still able to use us for his good as long as we trust him. Elizabeth Elliot once said, and she was back in the 50s, she's famous for her husband's death, actually. He was a missionary to the Aka Indians and South Americans, and him and 3 buddies where they were speared while trying to witness and evangelize to these untouched people, unreached people groups. She lost that husband, and then she married somebody else, and she lost that one as well. And so she truly got to feel and know what it meant, the depths of deep grief. Okay? And she wrote a whole bunch of books, a bunch of sayings, but one of her quotes is, God is God. If he is God, he is worthy of my worship and my service. I will find rest nowhere else but in his will. And that will is infinitely, immeasurably, unspeakable beyond my largest notions of whatever he's up to. And can you and I, can we get in that boat, or can we get closer towards that? Again, my two examples I just gave you, I failed that test. Okay, so I pray and I hope that we can get closer towards trusting God in that as well. And maybe our problems are because we aren't unconditionally trusting the great shepherd as we should. Or because we're elevating other people or things in our own lives into places where they shouldn't be, thinking that our spouse or our parents or our friends need to be able to fulfill these knowledge and trust voids in our lives, instead of actually turning to Jesus. He's the only one who can fulfill that position. So, how do we get there? How do we get to beginning with God, knowing God, trusting God? We discover the grace of God. Proverbs 20 verse 9 says, "Who can say, I have made my heart clean, I am pure from my sin?" And Proverbs 16 verse 6 says, "By steadfast love and faithfulness, iniquity is atoned for. And by the fear of the Lord, one turns away from evil." Now the first one, Proverbs 20, it's just a rhetorical question about the Old Testament and the Old Testament cleansing, because back in those days they had to sacrifice animals to clean themselves from sin. So the writer of Proverbs is saying, not only are you a sinner who does sin, but you can't even clean yourself from your sin, right? You're stuck in your sin. The second, steadfast love, has to do with God's never-changing love, his compassion, his tenderness, his care towards us. The word faithfulness, the Hebrew word for that, has more to do with the idea of a never-changing commitment to truth and to justice. So we have steadfast love and caring and compassion, along with justice, and the perfect God needing to be perfect and people around him being perfect when we cannot. So how do we cross that gap? Back at the beginning of creation, we had the first Adam, okay, where God said, "Trust me and you will live. Follow me and I will be with you." All through the Old Testament, he said that again and again and again. Whenever the Israelites disobeyed, he said, "Trust me, find me, follow me, love me, serve me," over and over and over again. The Bible says, "Trust me and I will do this." Then we see the second Adam, Jesus. This is the only time in history where he comes on the scene, the only time in the Bible where the phrase is, "Trust me and I'm going to destroy you." Okay? Jesus knew what was going to happen. When he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, he prayed to God. He said, "Father, if you will, remove this cup from me." He knew what was coming. He knew the abandonment and the affliction and the torture and the pain he was about to experience. And he asked if there was any other way. Yet even though he knew what was coming, he still trusted his Father, because his Father's message, the plan was, if you hold on to your life, Jesus holds on to his life, they're going to lose theirs. But if you give up your life, if you lay down your life, they're all going to get it back. He did it for you, and he did it for me. So when Jesus says, get rid of your ifs, get rid of your, I just want to hold on to my life, I just want to follow my own thing, when you start saying those things, and when he says, let go of your life, let go of this, let go of that, do things differently, follow me, he knows what it's like, because he's been there before. He's done it. He's not just an abstract deity who says, do this and this and this and this, and that you'll live. He's gone through it, he's walked through the pain, he knows your sorrow, he knows your griefs, because he's been there. And again, on a much more extreme level, being abandoned by God. Yet the difference is Jesus gave up his life, he was abandoned, he was tortured and tormented. And Jesus says when we give up our lives, we'll be embraced. We'll become sons and daughters of the King. The one who breathed out the stars, who holds the whole universe together. Okay? And that's Jesus' deal that he has to offer people. So, if you've never met Jesus, or you never asked him into your heart, if you've never received him, what are we waiting for? What are you waiting for? Why are you clinging on to yourself and just trying to make it? So if there's anyone out here today who hasn't begun to know and to know him, to trust him, and to follow him, then I pray that you may work that out and sort that out today. You can grab Blake, you can grab me, we can have a chat about it, we can meet up for coffee sometime this week. And we want to settle that gap between you and what Jesus claims he is, either for him or not for him, believing him or not believing him. Proverbs 28 verse 14 says, "Blessed is the one who fears the Lord always, but whoever hardens his heart will fall into calamity." And Proverbs 9 verse 10 to 12, "Fear of the Lord is the foundation of wisdom. Knowledge of the Holy One results in good judgment. Wisdom will multiply your days and add years to your life. If you become wise, you'll be the one to benefit. But if you scorn wisdom, you will be the one to suffer. And by the way, for those of you who are born again already, this whole knowing and trusting and following him, it isn't overnight. It doesn't happen instantaneously. Yes, justification happens instantaneously. You're made right with God. But this is a process of sanctification, getting closer and closer and following and trusting him more and more and more and deeper. But when we daily make the fear of the Lord our prize and set him before our eyes, we get to work out our salvation with fear, which is Philippians. Okay? And that's the lifelong process. So is your knowledge of God still an abstract reality? Do we still treat him as if he's this thing that's over there and kind of comes into our life every once in a while? Or have you asked him to be intricately involved with you? Do we spend time meditating on his word? Do we spend time communing with him in prayer, spending time in fellowship with other believers? Maybe for some people they find being in nature, going on hikes or swims in the ocean, or being able to experience him in other tangible ways brings out this fear and awe and wonder and astonishment of who God is. Because the more we become wrapped in God, the more that God moves from being an abstract reality or idea to a fully living, fully breathing experience. And we find that the money, the fame, the fortune, the family, the things that we think are really important, the things that we base all our other fears off of, those start to become the abstraction, and God becomes the reality. As the old song goes, turn your eyes upon Jesus, look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. We pray with me. Father God, we thank you for your Son. We thank you that the beginning of that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, it's the beginning of wisdom. I pray that all of us can broaden our depth and our knowledge of you, that we can surrender our ifs to you, that we can deepen our connection and our communion with you, Father, that we can just make this a priority in our lives. I know there's so many distractions around us. I know that there's so many things that we think we have to do, and whether it's family or friends or jobs or finances, and those are all important things, but Lord, allow us to, from today, be setting in motion more ways that we can become deeper in communion with you and having a deeper fear and awe and reverence of who you are and what you've done in our lives. We thank you, Father, for your Son. We thank you for Jesus. Thank you for his sacrifice on the cross. Thank you that we can have communion with you only through him. In Jesus' name, amen.